Welcome to the Plank Partners Candid Conversations, where we delve into the ins and outs of mentorship by speaking with industry leaders and someone whose career they help to guide. Find out how the mentoring relationship impacted them personally and professionally, its troubles and triumphs, and how you can apply their learnings and insights into your own success. I'm Sunny Franks Miller, a member of the Plank Center's Emerging Leaders Committee, and I'm joined today by Ginger Hardage, recently retired as Senior Vice President of Culture and Communications at Southwest Airlines, and now founder of Unstoppable Cultures, promoting the positive impacts of culture within companies. With her today is young professional Lauren Andrews, who is in her first position as a manager at Gagen MacDonald and is supporting internal and executive communications for Fortune 50 companies. Our candid conversation today is a little unique in that Ginger and Lauren have just embarked on this mentoring relationship, and we're going to get insights into how it started and how it's going, as well as how they're working to ensure a successful relationship on both sides. I personally can't wait to hear how this came about and the approach that you have found successful in starting a new mentoring relationship. So join me in welcoming Ginger and Lauren.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful to be with you, Sunny. Thank you.
Oh, thanks
I'm
for
so
having me.
excited to have you both. So I'm going to kick it off with a question for Lauren. Lauren, how did you make your initial connection with Ginger? When did you know that you wanted your relationship to evolve with her, and that you wanted it to be a formal mentorship?
Yeah. So Meryl McDonald is the founder of Gagen MacDonald, where I've had the privilege of working for almost 4 years now. And Meryl and Ginger are longtime industry friends. And when Ginger realized that she wanted to work with someone younger in career for this project, she reached out to Meryl, and Meryl nominated me. And I was very grateful for that. And not only did Ginger and I connect about the project, but she let me know very early on that she wanted this to be something that went past the project. She wanted to invest in me, get to know me. And I knew right off the bat that she was awesome for exactly that reason. And it means a lot to have someone like Ginger with her tenure and history give their time to someone more junior in career like myself. I always like to talk about the cyclical nature of mentorship, and I think Ginger is a really good example of someone putting their best foot forward and helping out people who are newer in their journey as someone who's been so successful with their own.
Awesome. So Ginger, you, I imagine, have had and continue to have mentees throughout your career, but you were inspired to take on a new mentee specifically for these conversations, which is very fun. How was it on your side in seeking out a new early in career mentee?
Well, it's been a home run, let me tell you that, because I got so lucky with Lauren. Because most of my relationships from traditionally have started, I knew someone somehow beforehand, we had a connection. We probably knew each other in some face-to-face role. And so this one has been totally remote, and we're proving that that can work, and it's been a great success. So we're making that happen. And as Lauren said, she and I are committed to making it a long-term relationship. And one of the ways we make sure we do that is just make sure we schedule our next conversation. We just keep it going. And I really thank Gagen for putting me in touch with Lauren. And well, you know, Gagen has such a great reputation, but I can certainly say Lauren fits right in there, and they are getting their money's worth because Lauren works all the time. I'm so impressed with her work ethic, and so it's been fun getting to know each other.
That's so cool. So obviously, this is a slightly unique way for a relationship to come about. Um, what else do you think might be something that's unique about your mentor relationship beyond just the its origins?
Being a part of Gen Z, it's really important to me to bring my full self to work. It's something I talk about a lot as a first-time manager, and Ginger has really created a space that's safe for that and encourages it. She not only asks about how things are going at work, but asks about career trajectory, aspirations, and anything in my personal life. It's great to hear what she's up to in her free time as well. So I think she just really created a space that's welcoming and inclusive for those conversations.
Ginger, how do you go about creating that kind of space as maybe a more senior person? I imagine that you would feel like the onus is on you a little bit to set the tone in these conversations, right? How do you go about that?
Yeah, well, one of the ground rules, I don't get involved in Lauren's day-to-day operations of obviously, of course, and that helps a lot. We talk about long-term career or maybe a particular issue with the client that might come up, but we don't talk about who that client is. So I don't want to get too involved in her day-to-day. She knows exactly what she's doing there, and the most important thing about Lauren, and I would encourage this for anyone who's wanting to start a mentee relationship, is to ask good questions. And Lauren asked a lot of questions. So that has been terrific. But one of the things I've noticed is that Lauren usually already has the answers. So it's up to me to really listen to what she is talking about the essence of a problem she might be dealing with. And very often, if she keeps talking, she comes up with her own solution. And usually my role is to get to reinforce it because she really does have a good idea and good insight about where she might be going. So, so we're committed to keeping it going, the relationship going. And one of the things we've really had to be, and I would encourage this with other relationships, is to be flexible. Because the most important thing is Lauren's got to be responsive to her day-to-day job. So if that big client in New Jersey needs her time at 10 o'clock and she and I are scheduled at 10 o'clock, we reschedule. And so I think you just got to be committed to making sure it gets back on the calendar. But we've been very flexible, knowing that for her to be ultimately successful, she's got to stay on schedule with what her work commitments are. But we've made it work.
And I think that's so generous of you, Ginger, to keep that in mind, especially, I imagine that someday I may, and you already have, maybe gotten to a place in your career where people are bending to accommodate you. And I really think it's a very generous take to keep in mind that that's not necessarily where someone at the same stage as like Lauren or myself might be yet in our careers. So I think that's very cool. You made a point earlier about asking questions and asking great questions. Lauren, how are you prepping for these meetings? Are you do you go into them knowing what you're going to talk about already? Is it a little bit more organic? Are you researching questions in advance? What's your approach?
I think, like a few other things, I don't always have an approach for things like this. And I think with Ginger and I, in client work, and especially client facing, you always have an agenda. You're always working 5 days in advance. And I've actually really appreciated the organic nature of Ginger and I's relationship. A good bit of it has been preparing for this call. So that's always been an agenda topic for us as we work through different topics and discussions. But in general, I would echo the sentiment she shared about not necessarily weighing in, but kind of letting me listen or letting me talk so she can listen. And she doesn't give herself enough credit. I think she steers me towards some realizations that I wouldn't have without her help. But definitely, like, I feel that I can go to her with things that are hard to go to anybody with, especially within your company. So I would encourage anybody who does have a mentor to make the best use of your time, even if it's not a formal agenda. Come with what you want to talk about and be prepared to feel supported. At least that's been my experience with Ginger. She's been very patient and very good listener. Even when I don't realize that she's contributing, she is, because she's helping me make realizations that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah. And I'll just jump in there too. We've been very vulnerable with each other. And I think that builds trust very quickly. I've had some health issues. Lauren has had some health issues, and we've just been real honest. That's real life. And we haven't had, with a client, you might cover it up. But with each other, we've been just really honest. Like, today is not a good day. I'm not having a good health day, and we reschedule. So we're just being vulnerable and real, and having a friendship as much as a mentorship.
And I think vulnerability plays such a big role in establishing trust, and especially early on in a relationship, like you two are, it's particularly important to establish that level of trust. And so I think that, that's something, especially when you're on the receiving end as a more junior person, it's really important to feel like the more senior person in the relationship is, willing to be vulnerable with you too. Because what a huge sign of like respect, which I think is so important, that there is some level of equality and parity in the relationship, even if you're both bringing very different things to the table. So let's move the conversation along. Lauren, can you give us a specific example as to how Ginger has mentored you when you've faced significant work challenges or times you think you've failed or could have done better?
Yeah, so I just kind of spoke to this a little bit, but I would say Ginger is the most active listener I've worked with in recent memory. Um, from the very first meeting, our first session, I just felt calmed by her presence. I didn't feel like I had to be as buttoned up as many of us do when we're on a traditional work meeting, which I don't want to over-index on that, but I do want to emphasize the importance of that first interaction. Like, it really set the tone for our relationship today. When we were exploring topics for this series, she was also a sounding board. She gave me advice like very early on, like gave me not only so much of her time, but so much advice that many of us want or and are so eager to get that we never do. Like, I recognize the access to someone at her level is really abnormal. So very appreciative for that. And she's also reminded me more than anything to slow down and make sure that we're prioritizing things of value. I mean, we just alluded to the health discussions, but also as an emerging leader and someone who's younger in career, you can really feel the pressure to say yes to everything and be the person that's online the first and offline last. And I think she's given really good advice on how to speak and show up in the workplace and how to still be successful without maybe overextending yourselves in ways that so many of us are used to. But it's evident in all of my interactions that she has such a wealth of experience, and it's no surprise that anybody you say her name to is just smiling instantly. It's how I feel every time I get off the phone with her. I'm immediately more energized. So while there's not a specific work issue, as she alluded to, we don't go into specifics with clients. I think she's just been really valuable in providing a perspective that we've all known at one time, but she's kind of reminded me of the importance of just taking care of yourself, but also showing up well at work in the ways that matter.
That's awesome. And we all know Ginger's background is very much influenced by her work in culture building. And so I have to imagine that a piece of that maybe comes from your background in culture, Ginger. Just for the listeners at home, what do you have a particular piece of advice around like balancing work and life? Maybe something you've shared with Lauren as a young professional. I'm sure I personally am interested in hearing. I'm sure many of us would be.
Well, I think it's changed over the years. And so I would have a lot of adjusting to do if I were back in the workplace full time, because it's changed. It's changed so much. I know there were many times where um, I, I would completely stress out and show up for things where I wasn't fully prepared, or so I think our world has changed. I think we are giving people more grace. We're recognizing they have a full life, and if we're not taking care of the full spectrum that someone's dealing with in their life, we're not being a good employer. We're not being good leaders. So I think the world has changed, and I think for the better. And how are we doing that to recognize the whole person? Now, since I'm no longer full time in the workforce, I'm sure there's some downsides to that as well that I'm not seeing. But what I'm seeing is the positive aspects of that flexibility.
Awesome. So, Ginger, as a workplace culture champion, when you're talking with Lauren, do you advise her on the kinds of cultures she should be looking for in potential employers? And if so, what kind of culture would you advise her towards, or any of us?
Well, I couldn't advise her toward a better workplace culture than she already has, because I think she's hit the jackpot with Gagen, because they really, part of their job is to consult with organizations on how to have great workplace cultures. And so they walk the talk every day. So it's not just pretending that you know how to, they walk the talk every day. And I think Lauren has a great background from Gagen about how they approach culture. And one of the things she's doing, I know, is taking that approach and using it with her clients as well. So kudos to the great culture that Gagen has already established.
Maybe not everyone works for Gagen, right? Not everyone
Right,
works as
right,
the best cultural fit.
right.
So if you were advising someone who might be earlier in their career, doesn't necessarily know what good or bad really looks like yet, what are some things that they should be looking out for early on, maybe even prior to being hired in the interview process or early on in their career? That could be green flags or red flags for good
Yeah.
or bad culture.
Well, I think there's many more ways that we can check organizations out today. Things are much more transparent, whether you're looking at it Indeed or LinkedIn, or there's so many more ways that you can look inside of organizations and use networking to get in touch with people who actually work there. So some of the flags that if I'm about to go in and talk to a client, that's one of the things I definitely do, is look at what their employees are saying online, what their customers are saying online, and looking for those red flags. And I think oftentimes what I'm seeing is just higher expectations without the devoted resources. So if you've got an employer who has really high expectations but isn't giving you the level of support and resources, that is definitely a red flag. So try to get inside an organization as much as you can, to understand what's going on. Interviewing with as many people as possible. That's one of the things we definitely made sure people did at Southwest Airlines. We wanted to make sure you fit in with our culture. And so if you can insist upon that going into an organization, I'd like to speak. That would be rare for a job applicant to do, but that shows how serious you are about wanting to fit in. So could I speak to someone because I know a partner department is going to be in marketing. Would it be okay if I spoke with someone in the marketing department? So be that type of applicant, where you're trying to be as much in control and understanding what the dynamics are before you go there.
That is such an interesting piece of advice, to ask for additional interviews. Like, I would like another round of interviews, please. But I think that it does show. I mean, as a hiring manager, if someone were to say that to me, I would certainly be, struck by how much care they are putting into this. And it's not just about like trying to get to the end to get hired. So that's really interesting. Um, I also think that I love your point about research. I personally am big on networking, and I always say it's only creepy if you make it creepy when it comes to doing a little bit of pre-research, right? You don't have to let on just how much you might have read on the internet, but it will allow you the opportunity to make more informed decisions and also have better conversations if you already know that something is, like an important piece of their culture or something that you have seen as a theme. Like, it empowers you to know to ask about it in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. So that's really cool. Okay, Lauren, we're coming back to you. You posted on LinkedIn that after a confidence at the table session as a Bank of America intern, you learned that confidence comes from the people in your life that reassure your capabilities. How has working with Ginger inspired your self-confidence in your abilities, especially when you were feeling challenged?
Yeah. I think I've spoken a lot about like Ginger's calming presence and how much that's helped kind of bridge some of the gaps. But as a student, I was extremely type A. And when you are dropped out of a grad school COVID environment into corporate America, it can be difficult to find your footing. And that was certainly my experience. There isn't an equivalent in a corporate agency world of getting an A in a class, which became apparent to me fairly quickly. As I reflect on my 5-year career, there are some pivotal moments in terms of like project leadership and different clients that I've worked with. And one that I think is big for me right now is that I'm a first-time people manager. And it's been really valuable to me over the past 6 months in that role to reflect on some of the managers and mentors that I've had. And I cannot say enough, not only as a result of my experience at Gagen, but just in general about how fortunate I've had to not only have strong leaders, but strong female leaders guide me along the way. But one thing that doesn't go away is that feeling of imposter syndrome. And I think that's something that we all resonate with, whether you're in my shoes or Ginger's. And one of the things that I really appreciated when I talk about confidence and presence that she brings to those meetings is she makes certain difficulties feel natural. So like when we're talking about something like imposter syndrome, it can be really difficult to, one, admit that you have it and to navigate through it. And I've just really appreciated Ginger's like calming responses to some of the things that I say. Like it can be very difficult to not seem like you're talking down on yourself. And I think Ginger has offered some unique perspectives on how you can kind of work through difficulties that are happening currently in your work or professional life and make them productive. So I've appreciated that, and I've also just appreciated how willing she's been to share her own experiences. Obviously, I'll keep them between the two of us, but there are certain things that she shares, and she's like, one time this happened, and you're like, you should write a book. That's not real life. But I truly just think that it's about leaving like every interaction better than you found it, and I think Ginger has been a reminder, especially for me as a people manager, to make sure that experience is as great as you can have, because you talk about culture, and I firmly believe that if you have a strong people manager, you have most of what you need in a culture in your organization. So
Yeah, I think that's so true, isn't it? HR always says that people don't leave companies, they leave their boss, right? So I think that that is such an important element. And as a also first time people manager, it's something I think about all the time. Um, and one thing that I thought was really interesting about what you just said about coming from, you know, a very achievement oriented background. You said you were type A. I also was a very type A, like overachiever throughout school. And it's just so different when you come into the corporate world and you're so used to getting a promotion every year because the seniors graduate and then the juniors become seniors and they get the lead in the like high school play and they become yearbook editor. And then you as a freshman move into being a sophomore and you're like an assistant, whatever, you're just like from kindergarten onwards, you're so it's deeply entrenched, especially in people who are very achievement oriented, that like things should be moving at a consistent pace. And then you get into corporate America and you're not being graded necessarily, and you're also not getting a promotion every year. So I think that that is something that is super relatable. And one of the things that I know my mentors have helped me a lot with, and it sounds like you're having similar conversations with Ginger. It's awesome. Ginger, how do you try to bridge the gap, especially the professional generation gap in your relationship with Lauren, with the advice that you share with her? I've heard you a couple times throughout this conversation say, well, things are a bit different now. But how do you, still find that commonality?
Well, I feel lucky. I don't feel there's a big generation gap between Lauren and I, just because we respect each other so much, and she's so mature. So we can just we're all over we can zigzag and move all over the place. So we don't really we haven't let it become an issue. And but one of the things I'm learning from Lauren all the time. I'm learning about how she deals with clients, how I can't imagine going for the first time into a client meeting and everybody's a square on Zoom. I mean, I'm one of these people, I read a room. I'm terrible about reading a Zoom screen. So I've just learned so much from her about the new dynamics and how some new approaches, and I've appreciated that. So it's been symbiotic, and we are learning from each other, and I'm so grateful for that.
And Lauren, it's very clear that you are very thoughtful about multi-generational dynamics and kind of how you approach those things? I know you've written about today's multi-generational diverse workforce and the importance of tailoring communications around what each person needs to know and how they want to hear it. Obviously, there's a generational gap between you and Ginger. So how have you maybe supplemented Ginger's advice with counsel from other professionals who might be closer to your level? And how do you identify those peer mentors?
Yeah, I think for Ginger, this whole process has been like something I didn't know I needed. Like a lot of the advice I've gotten has been from people that are in my remit, and we talk a lot about how valuable it is to have somebody outside of your 9 to 5 offer that perspective. I think we've alluded to some of this before, but her perspective is much more valuable when I think about big picture. Like obviously I love my role at Gagen, I love the work that I do, but I will hopefully live to be 65 and retire one day, and who knows what my journey will be to get to that point. So I've appreciated her insight into like determining as a young professional 5 years in like what a career path looks like, what you want to get out of it, those types of conversations. On a day-to-day basis, I seek advice from so many different types of people. And I think there's a few factors that go into like people that I feel comfortable speaking to. And with these examples, I'm thinking specifically about work. And as a young professional, I think it's difficult when you're navigating early career to identify them. But one is on the client side and your internal team, how they're talking about other people. I've made it my effort to befriend people who are talking highly of other people and only ever talking about people in a constructive manner, whether it be clients or others. So just in general, trying to surround myself with people that are really supportive. I've alluded a lot to the strong leadership I've had, and specifically strong female leadership, and trying to emulate that in all of my interactions. And then I think also in client service, you have to be really malleable. So I kind of look to leaders who are more senior than I to see how well they interact with different types of clients. Like in our work specifically, like you can be on with a type A client at 9 a.m. and then a type B client at 2 p.m. with deliverables churning and burning all throughout. So it's just really important to note like how someone with that experience who knows how to navigate. And then lastly, it's just the feeling of mutual respect and understanding. I think that you talk about being Gen Z and bringing your whole self to work. That is something that I live by. If I'm in a room with somebody and I can't talk to them about, obviously not going into detail about personal life, but if I can't cut up with them about the football team that lost over the weekend or have some sort of identifying factors to find common ground over, I find it very difficult to go to them for like advice or a difficulty. Just because I think when you see the best of people, you can see the worst of people, and it's easy to understand the whole person. So I'm pro seek advice. I'm pro raise your hand before you're the only person in the room trying to figure it out and going crazy. But I do think as young professionals, we owe it to ourselves to be intentional about the people that we target for that.
Yeah. And Ginger, in your Unstoppable Cultures manifesto, you talk a lot about optimism and infusing optimism. And so I can definitely see a lot of that optimistic approach in what Lauren is describing, even with, trying to describe, like, surround yourself with people who are looking at things with a glass half full mindset, and then looking at other people with that same kind of generosity of mindset. And so I think that it's very clear, kind of how your personal brand, if you will, like spills over into the kind of advice you give as a mentor. So that's really cool. Ginger, if you could tell, looking back on your career early on, maybe at the same stage like when you were Lauren's age at a similar part of your career, and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, great question. As I look, I think as we come into the workplace oftentimes, and you talked about coming from high school and, going from sophomore to junior, I think sometimes things are ingrained in us. And I thought I was an individual contributor. I didn't realize how much of my work I needed to focus on other people and building in other people. So that has really snowballed from when I first started working to where I am today, is realizing the more input you can have from as many people as possible, the better it's going to be. So I think if you're working with someone who's fresh out of school, they still may be thinking themselves as an individual contributor, and whatever you can do to accelerate helping them see the importance of working with others. But the strongest advice I could give you is to lean into leadership. And I think I was on a slower train, realizing how much leadership training, how important it would be in my career, and I would have jumped on it much faster. Now you can study it, but there's nothing like doing it. So how can you gain that leadership experience? Do you, as a young professional, if you don't have people reporting to you, maybe you can have the interns report to you. How are you going, or that you can mentor other people in the organization? How are you gaining that leadership experience? How are you raising your hand to lead a special project? More than anything, I would say lean into leadership training, watch what other people do, read as much as you can, get actual experience doing that as well, because the ability to influence an organization is going to come from how you demonstrate your leadership.
And on that note, I have a final question for both of you. What are the 3 most important qualities in a leader to you? Ginger has spoken quite a bit about leaning into leadership. So, Lauren, when you're looking for a good leader, or maybe aspiring to be a good leader yourself as a new manager, what are the 3 most important qualities?
Yeah, I think first, and I alluded to this with previous responses, I think just being a people person. To be a good leader, I think you have to be good with people, and that looks in all different types of ways. At Gagen, we talk a lot about the human struggle of change, and I think to lead effectively, you need to be understanding of the human experience. So that's a big one for me. Vision, I think it's really easy to talk about where you want to go, and it's really hard to show people where that is. So I think leaders that are really good at walking the talk and showing like this is the vision and direction for this team are leaders that I want to work for. And then lastly, I think inspiration is a big one. So people that are really good at keeping positive morale in the midst of difficulty or just a very intense work period, especially in consulting. You have cyclical times like quarterly earnings that can just be challenging. And leaders that maintain their calm and their cool and team presence in the midst of all of that, I've found to be particularly inspiring. So those are probably my 3 big ones.
Those are 3 very good ones. Ginger,
I have
do
3.
you have a different 3? Yeah.
I have 3. And coming from a communications background, I've got to throw communications up first. And it's first, and this has come up several times between Lauren and I, listening to understand. And a lot of people think they're good communicators because they talk all the time. They talk so well. Well, being a great listener is really one of the most important things you can do. Developing that plan and then figuring out the multiple ways to communicate it effectively and authentically. And then the second thing would be character, because how we build trust is so important. So how can people count on us? Are they going to be looking to us and our character to know that we can build something together and solve problems together? And then the last would be compassion, because using our emotional intelligence to relate to others is always a winning formula. And it also, that compassion also keeps us grounded. So go play with a kid for, a 3-year-old for about 2 minutes before you go into a meeting. And that would be a really good way to ground you and put that type of reality and compassion into how you might approach a lot of business situations.
It's inspiring me. I'm gonna have to, I don't know, find some friends with young children that I can play with before my meetings. Maybe my dog Louie. He's
make it real.
like
real for you. That's right.
Thank you both so much for your time. We've really appreciated it. I think this has been such an engaging conversation and particularly interesting just to see how close you've become and how far your relationship has come in a relatively short time. So thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, is there anything either of you want to say?
Well, thanks to Plank for doing this. And I hope we've been able to give some ideas for people who are thinking about a mentorship program. It's so worthwhile. And so I hope you are never find yourself in your career without a mentoring relationship in some way. So I'll let Lauren have the final word.
Oh boy, I don't know if we want that. I'll conclude by saying to anybody watching, just say yes. I think anything in my career that's been worthwhile to this point has been something that scared me at one point, including this conversation and meeting Ginger and all of that. But there's growth and discomfort, and I think that earlier in career is better than later. So just say yes.
It's awesome. You know, we hear as students and young professionals about the value of mentoring, but it's not something that gets covered in a classroom or that you really just know how to do automatically. It's time with both of you has been incredibly valuable and enlightening, just to show us how we can, do what you have done and find relationships like yours. So thank you. I know there's so much more we could cover, given the insights you both have shared. And I'd love to talk to you again in a year to hear more about the progress that you're making. You both said multiple times that you're in it for the long haul. So I'm sure it'll be no problem. We'll talk again in a year. But your dedication to making mentorship important in your lives is inspiring. And it gives us a glimpse into the reason that you've both been such a success. So thank you for your time and journey with us.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you.
And for those of you watching or listening, there are more candid conversations from the Plank Center for Leadership and Public Relations on our website. Please let us know how you enjoyed today and join us for insights and discussions with other leaders in the public relations industry.